chat. Hello, Ethan. How are you doing?
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. Lovely to have you here.
You bet.
And
Thank you very much.
yeah, we had a nice chat a little while ago. Glad to welcome you back. And I have collected a couple of questions from people on Self-Pub Connect. I've also queued up a couple of questions for our conversation just more generally. So we'll start out with that, but I just wanted to give everybody a little background on you and your agency. The Ethan Ellenberg Literary Agency was established in 1984 by Ethan Ellenberg after completing jobs at Berkeley Books in Bantam. Since its inception, the agency has represented a wide range of fiction and nonfiction. Its clients include best-selling authors, career novelists, and professional writers. In addition to new and published authors, the agency also represents rights on behalf of indie authors, small and medium-sized publishers, and literary estates. The agency is an independent, full-service agency with robust sales and subsidiary rights, partnering agents all over the world. And so you're obviously the right person to be talking to about selective rights licensing. And so I wanted to start out to give us just a little bit of context for the conversation is, can you explain what selective rights licensing is and how it differs from the kind of licensing people might think of regarding traditional publishers?
Well, the key thing is that indie authors don't give up all their rights or normally have a network in place to sell rights. You know, the book is the center of a circle of potential, circle of intellectual property. So when you write a book and you publish it yourself or you license it to a publisher, let's say in a very limited license, that is only one part of the potential income that that book can earn. If you withhold translation rights, you have translation rights to sell, and that's a very robust market. If you have audio rights, that's another robust market. There's game rights, film and TV rights. So you are really, you have a product, if you will, that can be sold many times in many ways to many different people. And the key thing about the word selective is not to give all those rights to a single entity, no matter how able, so that they are in the hands of somebody who might not, in fact, be able to do what you want to do. That would be even more specific. It's very, very rare for a publisher to sell film rights anymore. They don't have film rights. Those have all been seized and kept by the author. So they don't sell film rights. They don't shop in Hollywood. They don't have any time to do that. So giving a publisher film rights makes no sense at all because they're not going to do anything. If you're an indie, then the question becomes, what do I do with my film rights? So we could spend some time on that a little bit later because that's a very different and complex subject. But let's go through the raft of rights. Translation is a big, robust market. You want to sell translation rights. We're talking 30, 40, 50 countries, or easily 15, 20 languages. So you want to sell translation. How do you sell translation rights? It's literally, gravy in the sense that the book is written. The only thing that's going to happen to that book, it's going to go into a different language. So how do you do it? Well, there are two main elements. One is leads, where people come to you and say, hey, I read about your book, really interested. I'm a publisher in Greece or Germany or India or whatever. Or you can, over time, develop a network of co-agents. Now, one of the big things that my agency does is sell translation rights. And the reason why we're able to do it successfully is because we've built up over 35 years a string of co-agents in every major market that we've worked with diligently for years and years, and that shop our translation rights for our clients directly to all the major players in those markets. So there's a German agent, a French agent, a Spanish agent, all domiciled in those countries, selling directly to the top people there. So yes, if you could get a translation agent, someone who handles everything, or if you can get a co-agent, great. Audio, again, audio can be licensed by finding somebody or handling it yourself, the ability to sell to all these different audio publishers. And you could go through it. We get all kinds of queries, we sold opera rights. There's all these things. So selective is the key word. Selective means that the person that is doing the selling is ideally in place to sell those rights. And it's not an afterthought, it's not a grab bag, it's not neglected. It's selling those rights through the help of someone who can sell them, or doing it yourself with a knowledge base that's high enough so that you could be successful.
And I think there are a couple of parameters that would define the selective part of selective rights licensing. So the ones that I'm thinking of are geography, like in what markets do the rights exist, the media, like ebook or print or audio or what have you, time frame, like for the rest of time. Sometimes you hear horror stories about authors signing away their work for the rest of time. Are there other parameters other than the geography, the time, and the media that people should be considering?
Well, there are 3 or 4 or 5 axes that really decide things. The first is really what rights you're selling. Are you selling audio, ebook, hardcover reprint, book club, translation, film, TV, game? You need to know what you're actually selling, because all these rights are divisible. You can cut these rights into bits and you could sell them individually. That's number one. The second most important thing, other than the actual right, is the geography or language. Are you selling German rights? Are you selling the rights in Europe? Are you selling the rights in the Spanish language in Spain and in South America? So you also have to know the territory. Then you get into the nitty-gritty of what royalties you're getting, how long the license is. That's really the heart of the matter, advanced royalty, length of license, once you've isolated what you're really selling. But the first thing to figure out is, what am I selling? Can I keep it as selective, as narrow as possible? And can I make a deal on that basis? Very successful authors will have 30, 40, 50 licenses. They'll have 25 countries. They'll have audio and translation audio. They'll have a film deal. They'll have potentially game or things like that. So the first thing is what you're really selling, have a narrow focus on it, which territory you're selling in, which language you're selling it in, advanced royalty, term of license.
And are there any red flags that indie authors should watch out for if they're considering signing a deal, like phrases to watch out for, clauses to watch out for that might otherwise limit their ability to slice and dice the rights in the way you're describing?
Well, the really key thing is not to give everything away in a license that does not reflect this selective individual selling. We see contracts sometimes that a small press, a mid-sized press, or a large press sends you a contract that includes all rights, film, TV, audio, translation. Well, why would you want to do that? There are reasons to do it. Don't get me wrong. I mean, if you think this is a great partner, you have nothing else you want to do, you just want to get in the game, those are all respectable reasons. But a knowledgeable indie author doesn't want to give a single entity every single one of those rights. As I've already said, film and TV, they're not going to do anything with. They may not even know what to do. Translation, they may not do anything in translation. And all the money goes into one pot, plus they're taking a share of it. A small publisher will ask 50-50 on translation. When we sell translation, there's no partner. It's just us, our commission, and everything else goes to the author. So there's giant revenue streams that are affected by who's controlling the rights and how they're shopped, etc. So you don't really want to give anybody everything unless you, quote, have to, or you think there's merit to it. In fact, the really big battle in traditional publishing, which the mainstream publishers have essentially won, is that they insist on print, ebook, and audiobook rights. They don't want to do a license without them. Now, when we got going in the early days of all this, our goal was never to give them audiobook or ebook rights. And for a few years, we won that battle. And I have authors that are audio first, and I have authors that we've kept ebook. That battle is almost really lost now. The big publishers know that they have a great value to get you into retail distribution. They won't do a deal anymore in all 3 formats. And those 3 formats are the legs of the throne, if you will. Ebook, audio, print is where the income comes from. I mean, I have authors that literally 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 of the streams of their revenue. So that's a very good thing to keep in mind. So when we have these, street fights about rights, we're trying to keep one of those legs. And right now, one of the things we have done for just a few very elite authors is sell print only, which is almost impossible. But we have done it. And the other thing is to divide the English language rights between the United Kingdom, British Commonwealth, Australia, and the United States. So if you get a license in the UK and you keep US, Canada, that's also a major, major, major win. That way the indie author is selling direct in US, Canada, and has a deal in the UK and the British Commonwealth. Also extremely hard to achieve. But I think you can see where we're going as an author's representative. Our dream is to sell those rights selectively. Whether we're ever really going to get there for the massive authors, I think there's a good chance of not. But these are the tools that we have and the strategies we have that we're trying to achieve. You know, there's reasons to give those rights to traditional publishers. If you've got a great audiobook publisher, great. If you have a great print ebook publisher, great. But you want to make sure you have that. And the final twist really is a term of license. One of the Achilles of the traditional publisher is term of copyright. They ask for the book for a full term of copyright. They've always gotten it. That's the life of the author plus 70 years. Well, that's literally forever. So we don't like that. Even with a good out of print clause, when you do a deal with a traditional publisher, you will never reclaim rights. Now, in the early years, that's great. You've got retail distribution, major markets, all the rest of it. But what happens year 3 and year 7 and year 10 when they've lost all interest and they don't care and they're selling 2 or 3 or even 1,000 units a year? That's when term of copyright really stings. Because ideally for the author, you want the rights back. You want to either resell to somebody else or do it yourself.
We got a question from Kay, which is, what are the benefits of selling your translation rights to a foreign publisher compared to managing the translation process yourself, i.e. hiring a translator and indie publishing it in other countries?
Well, this is a classic indie dilemma. If you sell it to a foreign publisher, it's true you get an advance in royalty, and usually the terms are short enough, and you get an expert translation that doesn't cost you a penny. You sign an agreement, and everything is taken care of. You have a shot at that market. Royalties are okay, and the publisher can do much more than you can. So that's an attractive proposition in our eyes. If you do it yourself, you have to hire the translator, do all the production and marketing. You're talking about a $5,000 to $10,000 investment in a book that you are basically sitting on a platform most likely. How do you promote a book in France if you're an indie author? How does that look? We do a deal in France, and it's with one of the major 5 publishers. They're the ones carrying the weight. They're the ones that are marketing that book. Platform publishing is fantastic, but look very carefully at its weaknesses. And its biggest weakness is the discovery. No one knows your book's out there. You could spend 10 grand and make 3 cents, and that's not an easy thing to look at. So we're still very big on translation as a license. I think some indies do it. Some have been success. Some have been very disappointed. Obviously, it really varies with Kismet and the quality of the work and everything else.
It does seem as if an important step is for everyone to consider everything they do across the 7 processes of publishing for their books in their native language, and then think, if you're relying heavily on interactions on Facebook to solidify your fan base, are you going to be able to have interactions on Facebook, or I don't know if this is a realistic example, but on social media in French, only a small number of people who are going to be able to do that successfully in multiple languages.
Yeah, I would say that, again, the key thing is for the author to be fully aware of all the revenue streams that are possible that flow from a book. And then look at them, with a jeweler's eye, one by one, what makes the most sense? Should I license audio? Should I publish audio? Should I license translation? Should I publish translation? Should I try to find a print deal? Should I stay as an indie? All those things matter. The danger, conceptually at least, is that you have transferred all those rights to a single entity that is not the ideal party to traffic all those rights.
Do you have any insight into, of those 3, the 3 legs of the stool you were talking about, print, ebook, and audio? Is there one of those that is usually most productive or valuable for an indie author to pursue?
Well, the really fascinating thing is that in different genres, different authors have different strengths. There are people who do tremendously in audio and don't sell well in print. There are authors that have tremendous ebook careers and don't sell well in print. In the children's books area, you'll find authors that 90% of their sales are in print. These are kind of almost unheard of, right? A picture book author, they're not selling any ebooks or picture books. Everything's in print. So it really is genre specific. The ideal thing is to be available to the larger group of the marketplace as possible, and as many easy to use, financially able formats. So the goal is, the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 is unusual. That's more of akin to a genre writer. But it's going to vary a lot based on genre. I think children's picture books, the best illustration I can name of somebody who is, the game is in print. The game is not an ebook, and the game is not an audio. When the book is 36 to 48 pages, heavily illustrated, and all of 750 words. That's not an audiobook.
So I'm going to jump off that and ask a question from Jennifer Nestor, who is a children's book author. And she says, is it possible for a debut author who publishes a book that has a beautiful message to get picked up by a traditional publisher or republished if it's highly marketable? I've been querying the book and including the series potential aspect of it, but I've already invested around the amount you mentioned and feel that it could get more worldwide attention if picked up by a traditional publisher instead.
Well, the issue is that indie publishers are now being looked at as the farm club for the traditional publishers. And I don't know if that expression is current in England and the Commonwealth, but in American baseball, the minor league teams, the farm clubs, are the teams where the talent is trained in advance until they make it into the big leagues. So that's the metaphor I'm trying to get across. So now the indies are looked at as being the talent pool, the ingenues, the startups. And the big publishers are looking at this talent pool, and they're buying a lot. Romantasy is taken off, and the big publishers are buying it like crazy. So what happens is, if you can reach a certain level, either through attention or sales or notoriety or whatever, you may well get that call. We're interested in you. But I have to say very candidly, it's very much based on success. They're not, browsing indie publishing. They're not, they're looking at bestseller lists, but they're not just, just off anywhere looking for this or that. So the idea that you would catch their attention is remote unless you have a certain high level of success. That's really what's driving it. So you have every published book has potential for a traditional publisher if it reaches a certain level of success. That's what they buy. They're buying success. They're buying the fact that you are ready for the majors, if you will. They're not usually buying speculative. They're not going to read a book online that has 1,000 sales and say, oh, great, I love this book. I mean, it can happen, but that's really not how they operate. It's very much driven by numbers and algorithm and sales. So unfortunately, it's very hard to attract traditional publishing. Agents live with this. We live with it. Authors live with it. Their staffs are small. They've got tons of people chasing them. It's very hard to make that connection.
So I have a question from Charles. This came earlier in our conversation, and the question is, how does that apply on Amazon? So I'm not sure exactly what the context was that we were talking about, Charles, if you want to post a follow-up question there, but I'm just going to throw out the question as if an indie author is already publishing on Amazon, are there any special considerations they need to take into account if they're thinking about this kind of selective rights licensing approach?
Well, not really. I mean, Amazon is a publisher, if you will. If you're an indie, you're a publisher. So you can sell, we have indie authors who are very big in KU, for instance, that we sell translation for all the time. It's common. When a book starts to break out, you'll attract translation deals. You'll attract audio deals. So Amazon is not a problem, quite the opposite. Really. Amazon's a career maker, despite all the things that the troubling elements of Amazon are there, but they are a career builder for sure. So I don't really see the issue there. Authors will, the only thing I will say is KU numbers are different from full copy sales numbers. And if you get approached by someone who wants to buy you, they will look slightly differently at your KU numbers. They will discount them a little bit, not 100%, but they will discount them a little bit saying, oh, well, you were KU, it's not a full copy sale, etc. But, Amazon is a platform business, a successful one. And it is a major talent seller. And honestly, it's been transformative to the whole business. And despite issues with different things that I don't want to get into the weeds on, has been a tremendous boon to authors. I don't think any indie who succeeded in KU is going to tell you, they may be frustrated with Amazon, but they're certainly not going to tell you they're not making any money with Amazon.
Yeah. We got a comment from Dale Rogers. This, I think, is in response to your idea about the people who are looking for deals are looking for people who are already successful, in the sense that indies are the farm team for what they're looking for. And he says the same is true in music. Build your audience, become successful, then a music publisher may be interested. By that time, do you need it? Which I think is an interesting perspective. We also got a question from Jody. Jody Fitzpatrick says, I'm going to self-pub, but I'm very disappointed in the physical quality of POD print books. The Folio Society has had great sales with artisan editions. Do you have any info or thoughts on options as an indie for offset print production and distribution? I guess in the context of selective rights licensing.
Well, this is a very fraught area because it is possible to find and commission offset printing, but it's extremely hard to do for a lot of reasons. First, finding a truly dependable top drawer publisher printer is very hard to do. It's not easy to work with them. You have to be somewhat expert at what they're at the jargon and they're going to be using. So that is definitely a thing to do. I mean, we know some indies that are publishing, exceptional editions. They go into China for them, and they're getting their books literally printed in China when they want very, very high value printing. And that's all fine. But again, the dilemma always is the difference between licensing and doing it yourself. Both have their own merits. Doing it yourself creates unique challenges. Are you ready to turn yourself into the supervisor of a print operation? You may be, but then you have to do all the due diligence, find a good printer, get a quote, execute the contract, pay for everything, accept the books in your warehouse or with Amazon Seller Central, whatever it takes to have super high quality books that can be sold. And we understand the problem. We have an author that told us that they stopped pursuing POD with a certain published platforms because they didn't like the quality of the books. They just didn't want those books out there at that level, and they stopped. So yeah, it's a real dilemma. And the publishers are struggling to get all their books printed in a timely fashion. During COVID, it was kind of a car wreck. You really had 3, 6, 9 months waits to get on press, and they had to juggle their schedules like crazy. There's still some of that overhang, and the amount of printers at a high level have shrunk for business reasons that we don't need to go into. So it's definitely a dilemma.
Yeah, I think that the theme of all of these things are possible to do yourself if you fully understand what's involved in doing it yourself and are willing to take that work on. We got a question in advance from Anna Davidson, who said, my question is, how much of a barrier for a potential rights sale to a publisher is a pre-existing Amazon product record in their territory? I think this is probably related to the earlier question. In other words, would a U.S. publisher, say, not want to take on a book that appears on Amazon.com, even if the book is not actually for sale to U.S. customers? In other words, Amazon has just copied over the record from .co.uk onto .com. Obviously, the author needs to own the rights to license them, but I'm talking about optics. Connected or technical question, how difficult is it to remove or reinstate an Amazon product record for one territory without jeopardizing its existence in other territories?
Well, I wouldn't really want to answer that. I'm not technically proficient enough to answer that. I've had some experience. Let's just start at the top. No one cares about all that stuff if they think the book is so successful that they want to publish it. So all that doesn't matter. Getting through the labyrinth of Amazon technical specifics and stating and reinstating territories and trying to take down or not a book, trying to retain or shed a sales history is extremely fraught stuff. And I'm sure you'll hear horror stories from people who lost their whole sales history or got blacked out or whatever. So I don't want to get into those technical things. I'm just not an expert enough to answer that. But again, in general, the data that's out there, which is quite extensive, is either apparent or in the hands of people who really know how to do this. And if you have the potential to be sold, you're going to be dealing with somebody who probably knows as much about your sales as anybody. That's certainly possible based on what we know. And we have very adept indie authors we've sold. We've provided sales records to certain traditional publishers. They've come back with various queries and saying, well, we looked at this and we looked at that and, and blah, blah, blah. And we say, okay, well, here's the reason for that. I think recently we had one where they claimed that we'd overstated the numbers and they had only been looking at Ingram. We said, that's 5% of the market that we're in. Don't look at Ingram. Look at Ingram plus Amazon plus everybody else. So again, you will be looked at for your sales potential in a wide spectrum, based on everything they know, whatever they can learn about you, and whatever you could put on the table by saying, here's my sales, here are my reviews, here's what's going on with my career, here's the trajectory, et cetera, et cetera.
Do you have any insights into if someone is publishing on, let's just say, Amazon in Germany? They're publishing their English language book on Amazon.de or whatever the URL is, and then the book is put up in translation. do you have any sense as to whether the translation is always much more popular than the English language in non-English language speaking countries? Any thoughts about that?
Well, you're touching on what's become a very, very controversial area, which is the sale of English language books in Europe. There's really like a major fight now going on because especially the UK publishers are shipping English language books into Europe, and Holland and Germany and France and Belgium are being affected in very negative ways. Their publishing industry is shrinking as young people mainly are so bilingual they read in English just as easily as their home languages. And so there's a lot of angst and a lot of sales issues regarding English languages available in Europe. And that is very much a very, very hot topic. And English books sell in Europe. There's a lot of bilingual people in Europe. And the English books come in very expensively. I mean, how do you sell a $40 book in Dutch when they can get a $10 or $15 book in English and they're equally adept in both languages? And the Dutch publishers are extremely upset, angry, and they're being very negatively affected economically. So again, the readers, 80 million population, Germany, 45, 50 million, France. I mean, you could go through the list. Those countries can absorb a lot of English books based on the readership. It's just, again, it's a marketplace and customers rule, and a customer can choose the value proposition, the language I'm comfortable in, what it costs me to buy. I really wouldn't want to make any generalizations.
Yeah. Another question we had gotten in advance, this is from Michelle Rashman. She says, I'm based in the UK and wondered if there is such a thing as licensing your book to a UK publisher. I'm about to self-publish, but I've had some interest from the trad world. I don't see much benefit from going fully trad, especially as I've now gone to considerable expense in terms of editing and design, but wondered if there might be a case for licensing my novel for a set period of time in order to exploit their distribution and marketing networks, or is licensing normally only considered for overseas territories?
Well, no, you can license, but they most likely will not let you keep your edition. They will try to buy you out. If you want to indie publish in the UK and also land a British publisher, most likely impossible, because they're going to say, listen, only one book can be in this territory. You can't have your edition and our edition. I mean, there's a tiny chance that if you're in hardcover, they would take trade paperback or C format, whatever. But that would be extremely unusual. You would have to cross the Rubicon of deciding whether you want to stay indie for at least a while, or you think the potential in trad is so great that it makes sense to basically sell out. And there's certainly a chance they'll buy your edition. Since they're offering you a 25,000 GBP advance, maybe you say to yourself, yeah, you know what, I could get all my money back, and Orbit will publish me or whoever, and this is the right move.
When we were talking earlier about the challenges of having to take on the entire publishing process in another language. Can you provide some insight into to what extent, if at all, authors are expected to support the marketing efforts when their books are being licensed in other countries in a language they don't speak? So everybody says that even traditional publishers expect their authors to take on a significant role in marketing and promotion activities, but that would obviously be much more difficult to do if that was in a language where you didn't speak the language, you weren't familiar with the culture. Any thoughts on that?
Well, for the indie, I'm not sure how much you can do. There are things you can do, don't get me wrong, but they're very, very much social marketing kind of stuff. Unless you're pretty high up, the traditional foreign publisher does not expect that much. You may get asked. They may ask you to do a blog tour. They may ask you to sign some copies on occasion. They may ask you to cooperate in different ways. But there's a limit to what you can do in a foreign. I mean, obviously, you don't speak the language. You're not going on French television or radio. That's just not going to happen. So I think that at the very high level, they're solicited to do different promotional events. But for the most part, I think it's fairly limited. I don't think that should be a real concern. It's really very much the foreign publisher driving the publication of a book.
And I can't get through this conversation without asking you what you think about AI translations and if they are a viable alternative for indie authors to get into different languages.
I don't know. I have very mixed feelings. First of all, I have some authors that forbid it and will not sign a contract that allow for it. One of the tricky things about translation is that you have to have a translation that's in the vernacular that people read. You don't want a German philosophy professor translating your romance novel. That doesn't sound like a way to be successful. So you're counting on the translator to really be able to match the popular market. I don't know what AI can and can't do. I just don't know yet. I don't have enough experience with technical books. It makes some sense to me because you don't want to translate a 100,000-word book on biophysics. If you can get AI to do a 90% job. There are a lot of very, very little special niches where it makes some sense to me. Technical being the top one. Popular fiction, I just don't know. Can AI actually do anything that makes sense? People say that AI can give you the bones and then you can make the body kind of thing. Maybe. I really don't have a real opinion yet. It's very early in the game. And the people who are afraid that it's going to put translators out of work, honestly, I don't see it. I don't see any AI edition not needing someone, a native speaker or an expert speaker, going through the entire book and looking at every sentence and saying, does this make sense? Is my readership going to read this in Italy, Italian, France, or Spain, or say, like, what in the world is this? What robot created this? Yeah. So I don't see it that way. But it has raised some vehement objections, and I understand that as well.
Yeah, I had the experience. I had an English language book, but there were a couple of phrases in it in Swedish, and fortunately my nephew is Swedish, so normally I could just get the translations from him. But in order to save him time, I took a crack at it using Google Translate, and I sent it to him, and some of it was fine. But then there were a couple where he said that phrase would normally be used in a more joking way rather than a more serious way or something like that, which I think is exactly what you're saying, that it's the nuances that would be the most difficult to not have a person behind. Mm-hmm. We have a question from Jenny Heselden. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And this is a little bit similar to some of the things we talked about earlier, but just in case you have a different spin on this. She says, as there are so many ways to slice and dice the rights that you could sell, how do you assess which of those rights, by various ways of cutting the pie, have realizable value and are worth attempting to sell? Presumably, there are areas of those rights that aren't likely to get any traction or interest from potential buyers. One's worth considering anyway. Does that suggest any different spin on that topic for you?
Not really. I mean, again, it's, print, ebook, audio translation. That's the heart of the whole IP marketplace for the average author. That's what you want to sell. You want to be in print, in ebook, in audio, and in translation, whatever languages you can get. The other rights, hardcover reprint, film, TV, game, etc., those are very hard to get. Those are way outside of the normal course of business. So I would focus on that. And you should do what they call benchmarking. I mean, if you have a successful romance novel and you want to know how much effort you should make to sell translation, you should look up the 10 closest books to you. And you can go on Amazon DE and Amazon FR and Amazon IT, and you can see if those books are in translation in those markets. And if you begin to see a pattern of acceptance, then it may make sense for you to pursue that. Likewise, audio for that matter. Are you seeing a pattern that indicates that your book will be of interest to that native market?
Are there particular genres that you have found are specifically of interest in certain markets?
Oh, very much so. I mean, that's one of the expertises that we offer, and that's one of the expertises we get from our co-agents. There are some books that you can't shop in certain markets because of social reasons, which I don't want to really get into right now. There are genres that have no interest in certain countries. Some countries are interested in science fiction, some there's no interest at all. Some countries have no interest in romance. You could go through the list, almost like ticking the boxes of countries that have an interest in a genre and countries that don't. And so that's very, very true.
Where would a indie author go to find that kind of information? They couldn't really go onto the retail sites of the country, even if they could translate or understand the language, because enthusiasm for a certain genre doesn't necessarily reflect popularity of a certain genre. Do you have recommendations for how they could research that?
Honestly, I don't know exactly how you would do that. I mean, this is very siloed information. This is where the experts do have an advantage that's hard to replicate. You know, the years that all the publishing professionals have been engaged in business in these markets, face to face, year after year, you know, watching these markets closely. I really can't say that there's any resource that would tell you what sells in Korea or what sells in Japan. I can't think of anything.
We've been talking a lot about the big trifecta, print, ebook, and audio. If you look into the future, do you see other areas that might start catching up with the big trifecta? Like if you think that games are suddenly going to become real big or something like that?
Well, I think the market's very dynamic, and I think there's a lot of change. I really wouldn't want to predict anything. I don't really think that's really my job, you know. No one realized what audio was going to become. Audio has been an absolute lightning bolt. I mean, no one had any idea that it would grow to $5-6 billion business now, probably bigger even as we speak. And that took everybody by surprise. And another thing that took everybody by surprise was the importance of the narrator. People read everything that Joe Smith or Jane Smith reads. It's really like it's like old-time Shakespearean actors kind of thing. They just want to hear this actor, you know, talk. So that was another giant surprise. Ebooks obviously was miraculous, really. And how did that emerge to be this unbelievably inexpensive, you know, universally deliverable reading format? So that was also a giant surprise. And there are variations on that, games, et cetera, et cetera. I just think we're seeing a continuous evolution. Entertainment is clearly, in the widest sense of the word, in the best sense of the word, clearly going to be there. There's a lot of leisure in the world. Not everybody is growing their own potatoes. And there's just going to be a lot of need for people to get story and to be exposed to different ideas and to wonderful stories of different kinds. I can't say format-wise what exactly is going to happen, but I think if past is prelude, we've seen a gigantically dynamic market that is mixing words, stories, images, sound, music into all kinds of different entertainment vehicles that people respond to.
We actually just got a follow-up question on games from Kay Weston. She says, you've mentioned games a few times. My ultimate author goal is to have a video game created around the world of one of my books. How do agreements around this type of rights differ to translation rights or more standard rights? Do you have any tips or things to look out for or things I should be doing to help make this dream a reality?
Well, honestly, games is like $100 million movie. I mean, you know, those deals are extremely few and far between. There's some stuff in the middle and the small level, but that's just very hard to do. And just like with movie, you basically have to give up all rights. No game company is going to want to bother with you if you're going to retain anything. They buy the right to do anything they want. And you will get in advance in a small royalty, most likely. They may try and buy you out. The investment is so vast that they expect a very, very rich deal. And I think you have to live with that. They're basically going to have copyright in the game, not you. You're going to a format that is owned by the producer. Yeah,
I'll share an example from Melissa Addy, who is the campaigns manager before I picked up that role earlier this year. And Melissa's dream was to have a escape room created based on one of her books, and she actually made it happen basically just by getting out the electronic equivalent of the Yellow Pages, looking up escape room, and just contacting escape rooms until someone expressed interest. And now she has an escape room in the UK based on one of her books, which I just think is a fantastic thing to hear about. So certainly, participants, please keep the questions coming. But I wanted to, Ethan, I'm going to ask you a double-barrel question. The first one is, I'd like you to describe the role that you play with regard to ALLi and in support of ALLi members. And then the second part of that question, just in case you want to bake it all together, is if someone gets to the end of this and they're very excited about this and they're looking for help from ALLi and from its advisors for pursuing selective rights licensing, how can they do a self-assessment of their own work to understand whether this is something that is worthwhile for them and for you to be pursuing?
Mm-hmm. Well, the role that we play in ALLi is we are an expert advisor, and we offer our services to ALLi's members on the basis that ALLi has created gratis. And we try to assist indie authors with our expertise on that basis. And it's mainly contract review, but that's written a little wide in the sense that we also advise on business decisions sometimes. Sometimes someone will send us a contract and say kind of like, what will I do? And we have to say something like, well, the contract's okay, but do you want to do X, Y, or Z? So it's really, we provide one of the services that agents provide, which is contract review, deal review, on behalf of the ALLi indies that need that. So that's the main thing there. Self-assessment, it's very hard to do, really. Again, I think benchmarking is a key thing. Try to find out, take the next 3 to 5 authors that are most like you in content, in sales, in any of the elements that you think make you a cousin to them as an author colleague, and see if you could track what they've been able to do. That, I think, is the most important thing. And the other, of course, is leads. People get contacted. You will hear from a publisher from a foreign country in a different language who says, hey, I've noticed your book, and I'm so-and-so in Denmark or Finland or Sweden or Spain or whatever, and I'm interested. So when you start getting queries of interest, that certainly is an indicator that for whatever reason you're surfacing in the world of international bookselling.
Yeah, and those queries that you get that might easily be dismissed as spam. There's going to be a certain amount of that that's not legit, and you don't want to miss a legit offer or approach because of skepticism. And ALLi can also provide support to help you sort through those as well. What are the real ones that are worth engaging with, and what are the ones that you don't want to engage with? I think
we see a lot of, most of the leads that are forwarded to us are legitimate. We also see very few, but real, yes, just as you said, we see people that look like some version of a crook or a fool who's trying to do something they know nothing about, or is some kind of scammy thing. We do see that. But if you get a lead from a company and that looks legit and that you can find on the internet, you can find all these foreign publishers on the internet. If you hear from the ABC company in Turkey and you find that they're a going concern with a business address and a catalog and all the rest of it, that is 99% of the time a legitimate lead.
That's heartening to hear. It's a higher number than I would have guessed. I think we have hit all the questions that were submitted. Ethan, are there any other final thoughts you'd like to share about selective rights licensing for our audience?
Well, I think I would really reiterate the same old thing, which is don't jump at anything. Give some careful consideration to how this plays into your indie career. Don't waste your time on translation if it's 1,000,000 to 1. I mean, that you may need to grow to that point. Think about the difference between licensing and publishing. You might think, wow, I'll do my own audiobook and I'll keep all the money, but it's a $10,000 investment and you're just sitting on a platform. If you're approached by an audio publisher, well, the royalty may be a quarter of what you get, but look at the value proposition. That makes sense. You'll do better, especially depending on the stage of your career. Authors have life cycles and books have life cycles. The author's life cycle is some version of the beginning, the middle, and the mature career. And books have life cycles too. They have the beginning of the launch, early sales, whether it can establish them in the backlist, and then tailing off into deep backlist where you're just selling a few copies. So you need to try to not get discouraged and not to get overly enthusiastic either. What is the best use of your time and money? And I will give you a universal statement on that is 90-10. 90% of your time should be spent writing the book and becoming a truly wonderful in-demand author. That's the basis of success. Do not get caught up. As much as you think the money's going to come and this is great, or that's great if it happens. But the key thing is always the book. So you really want to spend 90% of your time, 10% in marketing and licensing, and not lose that balance. because ultimately, I think for most authors, it's ascending the talent ladder and the accomplishment ladder that will really provide success. And you'll see there are authors that have been in the weeds for years and years and years. I don't know if you've seen this new serial on Apple Plus called Slow Horses, which I think is quite wonderful. And the Wall Street Journal had an article on the author. 20 years, nobody wanted to touch this guy. He was dumped by everybody. And he found an offer with an American publisher and kept publishing. And all of a sudden, he's the best-selling spy novelist literally in the world. I don't think that's a bad paradigm, because if you stick to your talents, if you keep writing that top book, you have a better chance of any other combination of forces that I could name. Spending a tremendous amount of time and money promoting a book that may not really be there at a stage of your career that you're not really mature enough is not a strategy for success.
Well, I can't think of a better way to wrap up our conversation. We're getting several thank yous from the attendees on the Q&A.
Okay.
But Ethan, thank you as always. Lovely to speak with you, and thank you to everybody who joined us for the Q&A today.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll see each other again.
Yep. Bye bye.
Okay, bye now.